These are my daughters. So that's Riley on the right, she's 7. That's Alana on the left, she just turned 20 months and is finally sleeping through the night. And more than anything else, I just want to be a good dad. And I want them to be happy and healthy, I want them to be smart, I want them to be compassionate, I want them to be well-adjusted. But there is one thing that I absolutely suck at, which is keeping them off screens. How many of you have this problem at home? Oh, come on, you're lying if your hand's not up. Right now, the average kid in this country is spending 40 to 50 hours a week in front of some kind of screen. 40 to 50 hours. And that's a full-time job. Now, when you layer on top of that the hours they go to school, the hour they're in very structured activities, and then a few hours for sleep, there's not a lot of time for anything else. The average kid is spending less than 20 minutes, 30 minutes a week in some cases in unstructured outdoor play. Now, what does that mean? Now, these devices have been amazing at unleashing all kinds of new opportunities for interactive learning and access to information that we had to look up in books. You know, all those old things that have pages? But they're missing out on a lot. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time at the National Wildlife Federation is trying to think about how do we infuse nature into kids' lives. Because think about our own childhoods, right? The amount of time we spent outside, fishing, hunting, digging for bugs, building forts, splashing around in streams. I don't remember adults being around ever. I don't remember a scheduled play date. I just remember playing until the dinner bell rang, and then all of a sudden, some of us ran home, then our parents would start screaming, then we all ran home, right? So, I mean, it was awesome. But if you try to do that today, if you try to have a free-range child, if I let Alana or Riley just kind of run out into the neighborhood, I'd have a knock from child services within a few hours. So this is me. For those of you that are young parents, a wonderful way to get your baby to sleep is actually in a Bjorn while fly fishing. This is Alana sleeping. If you do a gentle roll cast with a little mend, you can actually put her to sleep for about 2.5 hours. It's an amazing thing. So, as we were saying before, so as the head of the National Wildlife Federation, the biggest challenge that we face is trying to recover America's wildlife. And right now, a lot of the species that we love in this country are struggling. There's about 60% less wildlife than there was 40 years ago. And this is big species like, moose in the Northeast or woodland caribou in the Northwest. It's sea turtles in the Gulf. It's desert tortoise in the Southwest. It's little things in your backyard. It's the fireflies and the monarch butterflies. It's the native bees that are struggling. So it's the little brown bats. It's the shorebirds. This is cerulean warblers. Over the last 100 years, just in North America, about 150 species have gone extinct that we're pretty darn sure are wiped off the face of the earth. And there's another 500 species that are missing in action. Now, we get pieces of this story, kind of in some regularity, especially with like Facebook. How many of you remember the story of J35? This was the southern resident orca off of Seattle in the Salish Sea that pushed around her baby calf. It was a stillborn baby calf last year. She pushed around San Juan Island for almost 17 days, pushing it around. And there's a video of this that I'm guessing some of you saw. But the thing that was the most remarkable about this story was the piece that wasn't told, which is the reason that these calves were dying was simply because there wasn't enough protein in the mother's diet. The salmon that they need to survive were being blocked off from being able to kind of make it down into the Salish Sea because of dams we had built over the previous half century. Similarly, how many of you remember the stories about the red tide in Florida last year? So this is a Goliath grouper. These are huge fish. I mean, these are fish that are, kind of feel like that Da Vinci picture. But these are massive fish. Hundreds of them just gone. It's one that we've actually worked a long time to try to recover. But sea turtles, manatees, dolphins, thousands of fish all died from this red tide, which has been occurring for a long time, but it's gotten really bad lately as more nutrients, more runoff, warmer water temperatures are kind of having these systems explode. Now, the reason I bring these up isn't to get you down, but it's part of a bigger system right now. And right now, about 1/3 of all the wildlife species are in trouble in the US. About 1/3 at risk of extinction in the coming decades, and about 20% are at extreme risk of extinction in the coming couple years. And I'm not talking your great-great-grandkids' lifetime, I'm talking your lifetime. And so we can scroll and kind of get depressed. And that's not to suggest we've had amazing successes. Like the North American model of wildlife conservation, the way that sportsmen and sportswomen pay into funds to try to make sure we recover species like this bighorn sheep, which was on the brink of extinction last century, and we brought it back. Wild turkey numbers are good, white-tailed deer numbers are good, mule deer are doing well, pronghorn, all kinds of ducks. Those of you that duck hunt, black ducks, wood ducks, things that were really concerning about 50 to 100 years ago are doing really well. And we've had great successes with some endangered species, like the bald eagle, like one of the greatest success stories of all time. The iconic stuff, we actually do pretty well with. So osprey, things like American alligators, things like brown pelicans. One of my favorite success stories is the grizzly bear. But for every one of these, there's hundreds of species that are in trouble. And it's because over the last 80 years, so the National Wildlife Federation was founded in 1936, our population's gone from 128 million to 325 million. We've destroyed 200 million acres of habitat across the country in that same time frame and built 4 million miles of roads. And so we spend a lot of our time trying to reconnect systems that we've either paved over, plowed under, or kind of cut across. And so right now, you have species that we're doing work trying to build overpasses over roads, trying to remove some dams that are obsolete, trying to make sure we're reconnecting habitat, and then dealing with new threats like invasive disease and this spawn of Satan, Asian carp, that is coming to a lake near you that eats everything in its devour. This is a crisis. It's a crisis here in Tennessee. It's a crisis kind of headed towards the Great Lakes. And then you layer on top climate impacts and kind of changing conditions, and it's a pretty scary environment. Okay, so we got the scary thing about screens, and we got the scary thing about wildlife. I'm here to make the case to all of you that the solution's the same. When we save wildlife, we save ourselves, and especially our kids. How many of you can remember what you had for lunch, or how many of you can remember what you saw on television 3 weeks ago? Anybody? How many of you can remember the very first time somebody took you fishing? Or the very first time somebody took you camping, or hiking, or just outdoors? For me, it was the monarch. I was reading Ranger Rick magazine, a good precursor to my future career, and we were reading an issue. I was 5 years old. I still remember it like it was yesterday. My mom was a school teacher. We're reading this thing and learning about metamorphosis and symbiotic relationships and migration, and I said, let's go plant some milkweed. So we went to the nursery, tried to find something that was appropriate, put it in the backyard, and a few weeks later, all of a sudden, we had these amazing monarchs. I learned so much from that experience. I mean, it shaped my entire life. I can't tell you what I had for lunch 2 weeks ago, or 2 days ago. I can't even tell you if I had breakfast today. I don't think I did. But I can tell you in vivid color that entire experience and how it shaped me. And so I'm going to give you a few of the reasons why you should, even if you don't care about wildlife, conserving habitat is good, and I'll give you some really quick reasons. You plant trees, it's good for air quality, it reduces the temperatures, it makes things a little cooler, it increases property values, it helps make sure that indices of like asthma and heart disease go down. If you clean up your waterways, you have healthier water. You're sick less often. You have healthier fish populations. You're sick less often, if I didn't say that already. If you have healthy pollinator populations, all of a sudden now you have healthier food, you have more abundant food, you have bigger plants in your backyard if you're doing any gardening. So there are all these kind of benefits that come from having healthy natural resources. One of the things we're seeing more and more is that communities that have healthy natural resources do better during extreme weather events. So this is a picture of some work we were doing during Hurricane Harvey. The places that had healthy wetlands and healthy prairies had places for the water to be absorbed as that storm was barreling down. They suffered billions of dollars of less damage than other places. Same thing with some of the forest fires. This is up in Montana. But if you look at the forest fires in Montana, Idaho, California, the places that had healthier forests, that had tried to have better kind of watershed management, places that had not built so far into the wildland-urban interface, did better. So again, healthy natural resources, better kind of economic outcomes. And for the overall economy, this is huge. So the outdoor economy in this country is $887 billion. This is a massive industry. So healthy natural resources puts a ton of people to work, 7.5 million people. And as all of you know from Tennessee, because you have some of the best natural resources in the country, if you don't keep these areas up, the people will not come, right? You have to have kind of healthy, enjoyable places. That's not to mention the benefits that like pollinators play in our trillion-dollar agriculture industry. So even if you don't care about the critters, there's reasons to care. But the case I want to make to each of you today is that caring about wildlife, restoring natural areas, and getting kids into nature is the best thing that we can do for kids. It's the best thing that we can do for their brain development and their overall development. Kids that spend more time in nature, kids that spend more time with wildlife, do better in their cognitive abilities. They do better in science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts. They develop their social and emotional intelligence at higher levels than kids that are spending more time on screens. They're less anxious and less fearful. They're less likely to be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity. They're less likely, or they're more likely to be coming up with innovative solutions to problems. Now, there is no script when you're in nature, right? I mean, like there's no kind of playbook to follow. You have to kind of adapt on the fly. This is Riley helping up some horseshoe crabs in my home state of Delaware, and Alana doing her best foraging and not letting us carry her anymore when we walk. You have to think, right? You have to be able to think on the fly. You develop leadership abilities, and there's also some great data coming out looking at the kids that spend time in nature, and especially with other kids in nature, they're less likely to bully other kids, and when they are bullied, they're less likely to respond in kind. They're more likely to respond in kind of a compassionate way, and because their compassion and their anxiety levels are so much less. They're more well-rounded. They're more connected with the world around them. So I have 3 asks of all of you, and I know you've had some amazing kind of tech kind of proposals and some really high-level stuff. My recommendations are very simple. Help me get more kids outdoors. It seems simple, but I tell you, it's going to change the world. It's the best thing that we can do. So I want every kid in America to just put down the screen for 1 hour a day on average, right? Get 1 hour of green time. So one less hour of screen time, 1 more hour of green time, a green hour, if you will. Let's just get them out. Camping, hiking, fishing, hunting, kayaking, canoeing, whatever it is. Just get them outdoors. Just let them run around without a clear activity set up. They'll come up with the activities on their own. There's amazing things that come from kids that are allowed to explore in nature without us kind of being helicopter parents hovering over top. The second thing, let's get their hands dirty. It's okay. They might get a splinter. They might get a little dirty. You might have to use that OxyClean. It'll come out, I swear. Help them plant a garden. Help them plant some habitat. Remove some native species. Plant a tree. Do a watershed cleanup. Do some kind of restoration project. Seeing the connections between what they do and how it helps other living beings is transformative for kids. And I really can't overstate the importance of getting their hands dirty and feeling personally invested in the stewardship of wildlife. And then the last thing is help them speak for wildlife. Unlike every other constituency, kids and wildlife are the 2 folks that have no voice in our democracy. We have to speak for wildlife. They can't speak for themselves. And so encouraging kids to get involved, again, this is a restoration project in LA, where we're trying to help create a crossing over some of the busiest highways because we basically destroyed some of the most important habitat for mountain lions. All these kids are calling up saying, like, let's build this crossing for wildlife. We're going to build it in 2020. But it was kid-led, which is absolutely amazing. And right now, there's millions of kids that are writing to the members of Congress saying to pass this thing called the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which will help foster kind of collaborative conservation across the country. It teaches them about civic responsibility, it gets them involved, shows they have a voice, and hopefully creates kind of a better civic kind of minded society going forward. I'll end where I began, which is when we spend more time in nature, it's transformative, right? It reminds us of our humanity. It reminds us of where we want to be and our place in the world. I feel very strongly about the quote that Baba Dayum that many of you have heard, you only conserve what you love, you only love what you understand, and you only understand what you're taught. Or, as my 7-year-old likes to say, as the Lorax says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. We can have healthier, happier, stronger, more engaged kids, and we can have more abundant wildlife populations. They're connected. We're less connected than ever before. We're more connected to devices. We've kind of traded this experience in the natural world for time in a virtual world. If we can get this right, we can not only have kids that are going to blow the doors out of the challenges we face in the 21st century, we can make sure we preserve the wildlife that makes our country so rich, and frankly, what makes America, America. When we save wildlife, we save ourselves, and there's nothing that gives me more hope than that. Thank you very much for having me today.